Déhfuair maithas a chuirde agus bhfuair giad fáilte roimh go TradTalk an tárna TradTalk acha an chiad ceann fiúil. You're very welcome to TradTalk on behalf of Éireann. It's wonderful to have you all here this afternoon. The theme for this year's TradTalk is happy to meet, sorry to be apart, and certainly that phrase sums up my year, which was filled with home recording and home streaming and homeschooling, as I'm sure many people can relate to. And all that was very challenging, but there were also some great things that came out of this year. There were new musical collaborations, there were new friendships formed and old friendships strengthened. And I want to, at this point, thank all the traditional musicians who gave so generously during this hard time, and they supported a lot of worthy causes and recorded their music and put it out there in order to lift people's spirit. Agus tá pobl úntacha gainn agus thom anna bhródúil a bheith mar chuide. We've a packed and exciting schedule for you this afternoon. We're going to launch Jack Talty's report, Navigating the Traditional Arts Sector, and he's going to be interviewed later on by Ruth Smith. We'll also have some interesting discussion about how to engage with media, which I think is going to be very beneficial for all of us. And we'll be hearing from members of Fair Play and Misha Fusta regarding gender issues and equality in the traditional music scene. So tá súil go muine sibh tainmh agus taribhre as an tránóna agus nach fada go memid le chéile in éon seomra a ríist. Piocca an the TradTalk eile nó beidir ag sesiún ceoil. Go dtí san go nola go bhór bha a ribh go léir agus benachtaí do mbliain nua ó charca goine. Slán go fáil.
My name is Tristan Rosenstock, and along with Oisín with Diarmada, I'd like to welcome you to today's event. We're delighted you took the time to be with us for this year's TradTalk. We were all gathered in Dublin Castle last year, and we'd hope to be there again this year, but here we are online, and we're happy to meet, sorry to be apart.
A big focus this year will be on our report, which will be officially launched today, Jack Talty's Navigating the Traditional Arts Sector in Ireland. The report will be available from trad-ireland.com, and today we'll be focusing on many of the key themes which emerged in the report.
But first, we're going to hear from some traditional artists about how 2020, the year of COVID, has been for them. How they had to be nimble, think outside the box, find new ways of reaching audiences, and all the while how artistic development occurred in spite of all the challenges.
So we're delighted to hand you over now to Gerry O'Connor, Cathy Jordan, Cormac Begley and Inni-K, who have each sent us an account of their own experiences during this time.
Hi, my name is Cathy Jordan, and when COVID struck, myself and Dervish were out in North America. We were in Canada, and everything changed overnight, and we had to get a flight as quick as we could to come back to lockdown Ireland. And we went from playing to huge crowds in all over the States, then to coming back to sitting inside four walls. And it was a very, very strange time. And I found the best thing that happened to me at that time was a kind of a return to the songs I used to sing when I was a wee girl growing up in Roscommon. So I set about singing a song a day during the initial lockdown, and it was a glorious way of connecting with people around the world who were all a bit scared, I guess, and wondering what to do during those times, and songs always gave me comfort. So to sing those songs was a very comforting thing, and have a little community of people around the world that we reached out to every day at 5 o'clock. It was amazing time for that. And I'm used to working in a band with 5 other musicians, and but then when we're here alone, you have to reach out into your own talents, shall we say, for want of a better word, and find what you can do by yourself as a solo artist. So it was a challenging thing. I did as much upskilling as I could, practicing guitar and bouzouki and bodhrán, and I did a lot of songwriting. I did some arranging, and I just got used to using Zoom and YouTube and recording GarageBand and moving on to Logic. So it was a time for a lot of personal development, I guess, and professional development, not just with the music, but all other things. Lots of applications were made, shall we say. In the beginning, I felt very closed in, you know, but after a while you get used to, you get into a routine. And I'm lucky enough to live in Sligo, and when the 5 kilometre limit was on us, 5 kilometres in Sligo from my house can take you to beaches and up mountains and in valleys, and it's absolutely beautiful county. So I was very, very lucky to be here for that lockdown. And, you know, friends are only a phone call away, a Zoom call away. So, you know, it was amazing. The adaptation was swift, and I enjoyed an awful lot of it, because there was absolutely no FOMO, fear of missing out on anything, because everything was right at your fingertips. All that was going on was in your own hands, and there was nowhere else you could have been or should have been, only right where you were, which was here. So as I said, what I learned from it, I guess, is that you can go anywhere by just standing still. You can go in your imagination, you can go with melodies, you can go with lyrics, and you can write about places and imagine them. So that's one thing I learned. You can be still while you're moving, and you can go anywhere when you're still at the same time. So all those songs that I sang during the 60 days, most of them I would have learned growing up as a kid, and this was one of them, one of the old favourites in our house, and it went down a treat with all the people from around the world that were listening every day. So it was like, near and more. Beauty fairy stole my breath away.
Consanchiv, Cormac Begley and so. Cormac Begley here, coming to you from within the walls of my vintage camper van, the Beauty, which is parked here in just below Mount Brandon, in Proshtamurach in West Kerry. I'm delighted to be asked by Traid Ireland to take part in this year's conference and to talk about my reflections on the lockdown, and I guess I'll talk about how I've used this time to benefit me artistically. I've been here since March, mid-March, and I found that a lot of my work between music, concert series I run in Galway, Tunes in the Church, was cancelled. I run week-long courses here in Dingle from Cusavoddig, a school called Art. I've had 2 courses that I had to cancel this summer. So I was left with very little work, but a lot of time to think and to reflect and to plan. I used the time as maybe an artist retreat. So I was disciplined, got up in the morning, focused on what I'd like to do for the next 10 years and beyond. So I created a bucket list for myself, a number of projects that I'd like to focus on artistically, 3 of which I'll discuss. I've been researching and writing a lot for various projects. The first project is an album that I'm recording starting next week. I'm going to record it in Seanscoil Chósa. It's an old school which is next door to my family home. Been researching tunes for that, local tunes and local recordings for that, and I'm going to record it. It's the second solo album, but it's going to be all about the bass. So an album featuring 2 bass concertinas, and I'm hoping to launch that early next year. The second project is a project that's been kind of put on the long finger for a number of years. I guess when you're travelling a lot, when you're playing music, certain gigs come up and it can throw you off track a bit. And I guess what I've learned during this period is to maybe focus more on and prioritise, I guess, the projects I want to complete. So next May at Féile na Bealtaine, I'm going to launch a one-man show, which is based on the research I did for my PhD and continued when I was doing a postdoc in UL, looking at the area of adolescent masculinity and the pressures and expectations placed on young boys, depression, anxiety, and suicide. I spoke to over 60 boys and gave out questionnaires to over 2,000 boys throughout Ireland, and I want to present that in an artistic way and through music, the feelings and some of the research findings that I published and current research in that area. So that's the second project. And the third one, I was thinking of ways to disseminate both the album and that show, but also as a way to work within the guidelines to be able to perform, and to be able to organise concerts for myself and for other musicians. So maybe 2 months ago, I launched a series from the Beauty. I'm sitting here at the moment. I did a concert earlier on in the pandemic, the Culture Ireland concert here from Beauty, and I thought about how to bring, I guess, put it into your own hands, like bring the control back to and power back to the artist. So I ended up coming up with the idea to have concerts, bring around chairs, and at the time it was 15 people allowed outside, so I had 14 chairs for people to attend. I've organised 6 concerts so far, many of them 2 here in the parish, 4 outside east of Dingle, and people can sign up on my website, cormacbegley.com/beauty, to subscribe, and I let people know when I'm in their county or in a town near them doing a concert. So that's how I've kind of tried to work around maybe creating work during these times, and something that I hope to do a lot more of in the future and bring around the country. So so that's it for me for now. Thanks for tuning in, and Nolly Cunna does the hand in it. I'm going to play a tune on the bass concertina. It's a reel called The Wheels of the World. So Nolly Cunna, and hope to see you along the way.
Jeeve, it's Mr. Gerry O'Connor, os Dundalgan, os fiddler. My name is Gerry O'Connor and I'm a professional fiddle player. I've been playing music all my life, and I started playing professionally back in '85 when I joined Jackie Daly and Jimmy Crowley for a project, and later Dolores Keane and John Faulkner for Kinvara Band. Then my own band Skylark, followed by Lulu, and numerous other projects after that. Jiggy with a Donkey with Martin Quinn and Gabriel McCardle, and Oriela with Nuala Kennedy, Martin Quinn and Gio Levigo. I've recorded probably 16 albums, featured mainly on 16 albums, and played on many others. And actually when the COVID kicked in, I was actually on tour with a band called the Irish Rovers, a big Canadian-Irish band, legacy band, and we were just finishing the tour. We missed our last two concerts, we came back to Ireland, and it looked like it was going to be a while before we could get doing anything. So I sort of played the long game, I suppose, and sat back and decided to do jobs I should be doing all the time when I'm at home, things like fixing up fences and repairing hedges and replacing floors and sheds and building a stone wall at the end of the garden. I keep thinking about building a wall in America, so I thought I'd do my bit for whatever and build a stone wall. During the pandemic, it's been a difficult time for us musicians, and I suppose what we miss most is the interaction with others. We play music, it's a social music, a recreational music, and it needs the bounce of others, and playing to a camera and watching it on a screen is not the same as doing what we shouldn't be doing, bumping up against people and hugging them and being close. And so it has been different. The first way it impacted on me was we had a live album ready for when I came back from the States, and my live album with Gio Levigo in April was cancelled. We had a Kickstarter in place, a tour before it, and launching all planned for the end of September. So we had to look at things differently. I got an offer from the Traditional Music Council of Ireland, of International Music Council, ITCM, and through Helen Lyons, and it funded me to prepare a video on a book that I published a few years ago, The Rose in the Gap, and it should be over here. This little book here was published in 2018, and what I did, I made a concert lecture on it, and through that I went on to develop that idea, and it became a bigger project in that I inserted slides, pictures that are in the book of the manuscripts that I was working from, people involved in it. The original handwriting was explored, and what I had been doing this as a concert lecture with PowerPoint, it now became an all-in-one video production, and I think it's pretty successful in that it's done. I might maybe go at it again now that I've seen it a number of times and I see a few little flaws and things I'd like to change. But at least through that initiative, I got my book up into a program which I've sold on to Boston College, and we also used it for the Field of Patrick Byrne as an online concert lecture as part of their programme here in Carrickmacross, run by the local cultist branch. Another project that came in and I developed on it was the Culture Ireland Fund, Ireland Performs, and I was one of 100 artists selected for that project, and we all played a concert, and my son Felemy, who's a documentary maker and video director, program director, he suggested that I continue on and do a series of concerts here in this room here. And with my background in violin making and repairs, I thought it'd be a nice little setup to present a half-hour hangout for 12 weeks. And this came off the back of a project that was initiated by Culture Ireland, and I was very grateful for that, for the funding for that, and also that it gave me the encouragement and the tools to record live from my little room here. And I recently did a concert just there on the 1st of December for Simon Community, a little benefit concert which raised £2,500. So these are little things that we can do relatively easy with the skills we've developed since lockdown. Teaching, I was never a fan of Skype teaching, maybe because the broadband here wasn't so good. I live on the side of a mountain, on the side of the Cooley Mountains. And but what has happened, I suppose, with improvement with technology and the way the country has had to improve its broadband system, and we were able to teach the Willie Clancy summer school online. School Willie Clancy was run for the first time online and very successful, I believe. It actually accessed a lot more numbers of students, and particularly younger students. And I think parents were very happy to have them all working from home. And I know not everybody can make it to County Clare for the first full week of July. So I think it brought it to a new audience. On the back of that, again, I developed some teaching online. I had some students. I travelled the world as a professional musician, and I was in Australia there last year, and Canada and the States a lot. So my online teaching has developed on the Zoom platform. So that has come out of all these situations that we've had to deal with, and we're very happy to do all that. The half-hour concerts really worked very well for me, and I think that developed a whole new audience for me as well. And I've been asked to go places. There was a woman checked in one day, and she says, welcome from, what did she say? Hello from Louisiana. I said, I'd never been there. And she says, when are you coming? And I says, we'll talk later. And there's a week of work planned for Louisiana sometime. So these are little things we can work off it. Looking to develop the Patreon teaching, because of the online teaching I'm doing, I believe I have enough resources now to prepare a program for that. So that to me as well will be part of my development during this lockdown period. Also, as a professional musician, we don't tend to be around in one place for very long, and to continue upskilling in the normal traditional methods of going to class and all that, it's quite difficult to do it when you're away every second week or home for a week and away for 3 weeks. So I took the opportunity to study yoga. So my yoga is a new development for me, and from that I think it also helped me rethink other projects. That's basically what I've been doing during the lockdown period, and I look forward to seeing my friends again when we all get on the roads pretty soon. I was going to play a tune for you. I'll try a few verses of a song that I've been working on during COVID. I think it's sort of our brains are all wired a wee bit differently from now on. It's a song called Bold Doherty, and it's a story of a man who goes off, gets an excuse to go away, and he doesn't come home to his mother's house, and she's quite annoyed with him, but he has his own solution to the problem. I think that's what we all have in these crazy times. My name is Bold Doherty from the North Country, where there's a still upon every stream. Landlady, be quicker and bring us a pitcher and fill it with liquor that's stronger than cream. Oh, if I had you, Molly, so handsome and jolly, although it's a folly to ask you at all. And if I had a glass and a mile to the bottom, I'd drink to you, Molly, beside the Donegal with me. Fall da da da, fall da da da, huddy, fall da da da, huddy, fall da da day.
Hello, Éireann here, Inni-K, and you're very welcome to my sitting room where I've been working from since the start of the pandemic. I've done live streams from this room. I've taught online courses on Zoom. I've done fiddle videos. The technology learning curve has really gone quite steep. So like a lot of musicians and artists this year, we've really had to adapt, and I'd like to just tell you a little bit about what I've been up to. So I have a schedule of working every morning here at my table, on my notepad and on GarageBand. At the moment I'm working on this song, which is very much a lockdown song about walking up and down the canal. So I just have my instruments around, record into the mic and layer it up and get some ideas. I've been able to share stuff online via email, with band members, getting some ideas back that way. We haven't been able to be together much at all. So again, it's all technology. I've been doing some songwriting with guitarist and songwriter Daniel Jacobson, and we'll be recording those songs at the end of the month. And that has been just through Zoom sessions as well, working on song lyrics together and sending ideas musically to each other. So I think the collaborations with other artists has been a very much a new thing for me. I'm quite used to working on my own, but this year has kind of forced me a little bit to reach out, because the aloneness has been a bit of a challenge, I think, for artists especially. I think we're used to, networking, collaborating, singing together at sessions and everything, and playing, and things just naturally happen that way. So there's been a little bit of you have to kind of push yourself a little more to just get in touch when you don't see people. But I'll definitely like to be a bit more proactive that way. Patreon has been a big new thing for me, and this idea of a monthly subscription from audience members. This idea also of an audience not needing to be massive, a small number of dedicated people. And that's been really heartwarming, to be honest, and a way I like to operate, where I'm sharing stuff a bit more real with people, videos from home, and monthly song circle I do with them online, little podcasts I do for my patrons as well. And they subscribe every month. So it's small and it's growing and it needs a bit of development, but I hope to do more of that in 2021 as well. So my Zoom classes online have been an absolute joy, I have to say, in the past few months. There's my Shannos crew. Bhí san cobblestone rih seo, gach mórt agus faríor is an ágant, agus tá muid súil go mór le bheith sa cobblestone. Fingers crossed, you really can't beat the pint after the lessons. But it's been wonderful to be able to go on Zoom and have people tuning in from around the country now, whereas it used to be Dublin based mostly, and indeed some people from France and from the UK. And I started a traditional singing in English course as well, so that's Tuesday night also. That's new, and I'll be keeping them going even when we're back physically. Hopefully there'll be a certain element online. So live streams have been really, really fun to do, especially at the beginning from home. I'd like to develop that a bit, a better kind of quality sound, maybe nicer environments. Though the sitting room's pretty sweet, seeing people's bookshelves and the like. So that has definite potential, I think, to be developed. I don't think other things now. I've done some fiddle videos for kids from home as well. You can see the hula hoop on the window. Allows me to prop the phone up there, and I made them for Dabble Do Music and for Branner Theatre. Over in Galway, I made some songs for children. So thankfully, I think it's all really about diversifying, without the gigs, and finding different ways to connect and different ways to make music. So that's it. That's how it's been, really. I hope everyone finds the next few months easier, and I suppose just finding new ways to do things, So wishing you all the best, and I'm going to leave you with Don Logue, which is a song I'm teaching my Shannos class, my course online at the moment. Song is Banach. Sagon eloig mohair ar farige Thor me lad is not in Diarmada Be agad fairy no is marga Is nieri rege marchele labgo.
I would like to congratulate Jack, Talty and Traid Ireland for doing a great job in producing a document that gives us the facts, shows us the breadth of the world of traditional music in the professional sense. Shows us the challenges that are being faced by so many musicians, and I suppose gives us a picture of like emerging difficulties and difficulties that have been there for a long time, challenges that many traditional musicians face in the professional sense. It's a very, very challenging career path, and a largely unfunded one. I mean, for example, like a lot of traditional bands, for example, rarely perform in Ireland, perform abroad. And yes, certainly Culture Ireland has been wonderful in providing support, but almost all these musicians and bands have had to learn how to survive, in a trying and challenging commercial arena. And I think traditional Irish music punches above its weight. Now, we say that the arts community in Ireland punches above its weight relative to its funding, and that is certainly true. But I think within that picture, we can certainly say that traditional music certainly delivers quite an impact on the world stage. And I think further to that, we need to acknowledge and understand that, yes, traditional music is far wider and far bigger than the actual sliver of musicians that perform professionally. But without this professional class, quote unquote, and I'm not by any means suggesting that they are superior musicians or anything like that, they just happen to do this for their living. But without that segment of the population doing what they do, it's fair to say that I think going forward, like, the larger world of traditional music would suffer greatly without inspiring artists, creative artists, artists that push the boundaries, artists that make traditional music attractive to younger players and children growing up, artists that pull the interest of the wider world towards traditional music and towards Ireland and towards its festivals and whatnot. So the professional class in traditional Irish music has not been represented, really, has not been advocated for. And so Traid Ireland, I think, are providing a very worthwhile and important service here. And further to that, this report, I think, establishes a benchmark, establishes a basis upon which to build recommendations, to be creative in our thinking, to imagine new possibilities and new solutions. And I think that this conference will hopefully help generate more ideas, create more possibilities. And all going well, I hope that that this conference will be something where we can all meet in person next year. And I look forward to all the creative ideas and solutions that are being discussed, and who knows what can emerge from this. So I wish Traid Ireland every success with this conference.
Hello, you're very welcome to Glór here in Ennis, County Clare. I'm joined by musician, producer and academic Jack Talty, who's also the author of this report, Navigating the Traditional Arts Sector in Ireland. Jack, it's great to have you here and to chat about the report. It's a really comprehensive report. I know we've only got about a half an hour, so we'll get through as much as we can. But before I get into the bones of it, can I ask you on a personal level, what was it that motivated you to do this study?
I suppose I was particularly attracted to the call that came out because I've grown up as a musician. You know, that's what I've been for most of my life, and that's how I grew up, immersed in a musical culture at home. So after that, I went through higher education doing research on traditional music, and for me it seemed like a very natural combination of both of those very different things, I suppose. So I just thought it was an opportunity really to investigate something that really needed to be looked at, and I'd applaud Traid Ireland for having the vision to go ahead and commission this report, because it's needed probably now more than it ever has been before.
And in the introduction to it, Traid Ireland said they wanted this report to harness an already rich community ethos within the traditional art scene, to empower the sector to communicate with a stronger and more coherent voice. And I think that really comes from the report. There's a lot of great work being done already. There's a lot of really well-established bodies of advocacy already who are working at a really high level. But it's looking at where we can draw that kind of fractured approach and make it more cohesive.
Exactly, that's what people have said to me through their contributions here, and that's what people say outside of the traditional arts as well. And I think we're very fortunate in Ireland that we have such high quality resource organisations working for the traditional arts. When you look at Na Piabhraíoll and the Irish Traditional Music Archive, Comhaltas Éireann, they're models of great practice, and they serve their membership very, very well. But a lot of people would say, both within the sector and outside of it, that there isn't one representative voice that can really extend beyond that and do its best to speak for its members, on behalf of its members, but through the voices of its membership as well. So I think that's one of the kind of the prominent themes to emerge from the report, that there really is a demand for one resource organisation that can, I suppose, dialogue with everybody and represent us as best we can.
When you look at the likes of Poetry Ireland or Dance Ireland or Theatre Forum, it's a similar kind of body, isn't it, that you're looking at? Yeah, it's just something that can represent everybody, rather than, I suppose, its own membership and its own specialist area. Yeah. If we look at the sections that you broke this down into to make it digestible, because I have to say, one of the things, I got the report, the actual physical report, a couple of weeks ago, and you take a deep breath before you start something like this, but I was so surprised by how accessible it was, and I think that's a testament to the work you've done to really make it digestible, because there's a lot of information there. It's almost as much of a resource as it is a report. Exactly, because I think Trad Ireland were very, very clear that it wasn't just to be a document that highlighted all of the, I suppose, the negative aspects of trying to work in the traditional sector, because there was a demand there to highlight the opportunities that are there as well. And I suppose I was surprised that there was such a demand for that. A lot of people aren't aware of the various opportunities that are there for them. Of course, we always want to fight for more because there aren't enough opportunities. That's just the reality of it. We have to advocate more to find and open up new opportunities, but I would hope that people would take a little bit of hope and faith away, and positivity as well, to realise that there are quite a few opportunities available to them. And I suppose in some sense I've tried to make a one-stop document that draws together many of the strands and many of the opportunities that are there. Yeah, so. And it demystifies it. It also, that overwhelm that you might feel as a practitioner, as an artist, where do I start and how do I get better at these funding applications, and what are the bodies that can help me to do that? And I think it's all very much detailed in the report. If we look at the three sections, the primary sections that you've broken it down to, the first one is the overview of the financial and creative supports available. Obviously, when it comes to it, we all love music and dance and stories, and this is why we're in this sector and in this community. But an awful lot of people, more so than any generation before us, I think, have chosen to make this their full-time profession and livelihood. So I think it's important to state as well, this report was compiled before the pandemic, before COVID-19 hit. But Jack, the thing that really stood out for me was the levels of anxiety and lack of security, both financially and just in terms of livelihood and choices, that came off the page. Exactly, and you can only imagine that's completely magnified now in the situation that we're in. But yeah, that's a surprising thing. Many people might see this as a response to COVID. It's not. These contributions were collected and offered before the pandemic, which is really alarming, to be honest, to be able to show that this was how people felt before we experienced the global pandemic. So it is frightening. And when you look at, I suppose, the individual responsibility to learn how to navigate this world as well, because it is quite admin heavy as soon as you start looking down the process of funding and application processes, and also just the rejection what that does for people as well, to kind of knock them back, to get better at that. Do you think that individual artists and maybe smaller organisations or bands need to be more proactive in learning about the structures that are there? Yeah, I do think that, but at the same time, this is very much led by the contributions and the voices of people that I interviewed, and some people would say that just part of being a professional is acquainting yourself with the things in the industry, more of the administrative tasks that you need to function. Others then would say that that's not their job, and they should be some kind of a mechanism to delegate that to other people, whether it's production companies. So I can see the merits in all of those ideas. So maybe an artist should just be allowed to be an artist, free of the admin and balancing the business and entrepreneurship. People are divided on that in the report, but I guess I see the value of it. It would be great to see
a production service provided for the traditional art, where, you know, that can be managed maybe centrally for the benefit of all, where people then can just be free to do what they love. You know, there's a lot to be said for that.
And into that, I suppose the proposed universal basic income, where do you stand on that, or where is Trad Ireland and your own report aligned with that?
Well, we did look at models like the Intermittent in France. There was no mention of the basic income at the time that this report was, you know, that has really been, that process has been accelerated because of the pandemic. So a lot of people use the French model, the Intermittent du Spectacle, as a model of good practice that could be tried out here. Of course, it's across all elements of the entertainment sector, so it's not just the traditional art. So that would be a huge undertaking. But it did appear a lot. People really felt that a basic income and a recognition of the work that you do, and I suppose some compensation or remuneration for when you're not working as well. You know, people are paying taxes, so people feel like that, justifiably, people feel like that, you know, artists should be supported in times when there isn't work, you know, because that's the nature of the work that we do.
And because the report is so solution focused, you know, giving a lot of recommendations as well, what was your main finding in terms of that area, the financial area? What did people suggest would be a really helpful kind of direction for this to go?
In terms of income, again, the Intermittent was by far the most quoted and referenced system. And I suppose in terms of a recommendation, where that was left in the report, I suppose far be it for me to say, you know, the department need to just roll out a basic income scheme. One of maybe the important recommendations is that, again, going back to having a representative voice, that when it comes to having traditional arts discussed as an art form at governmental level, that we have a representative. So the traditional arts isn't just, you know, left outside of these conversations, that any conversation about how we could support the life of an artist should have a traditional arts representative right in there. And I think that's really the most obvious recommendation that I could make, because, you know, I'm not sure I could get to the level of making recommendations to government and expect it to work out, but still it's a very important starting point, I think.
Yeah, and when we look at, I suppose, the funding that is allocated for the traditional arts, I mean, it shouldn't be a byproduct of the fact that the arts sector in general is underfunded. When you look at the slice of the pie that does go towards, you know, music, traditional music, dance and song as well. But in 2020, 2.6% of the entire Arts Council allocation was funded to traditional arts.
Yeah, it's a pretty low level. I think that would surprise most people. Of course, what it doesn't include is awards that can be applied for by any artist. You know, so you have a Next Generation Award, which is open to all art forms. So obviously that statistic doesn't recommend, or it doesn't encapsulate all of that, but what it does include is the money that's given to the traditional arts section for specific awards for the traditional arts.
When we compare Ireland to our European counterparts as well, there's a big discrepancy, isn't there?
Yeah, in terms of our reputation internationally.
In terms of our reputation internationally, but then when you look at the amount of funding that's allocated for the traditional arts in other European countries as well, so that's something that's come from the report too. Yeah,
and exactly, and the strange thing is that when you go and speak to people internationally, like I have done for the report, they see Ireland as a model of best practice, not in terms of how much funding we get, but they're so jealous and envious that, you know, we have the profile, that our folk music, our traditional music has the profile that it has, and they are totally shocked that we don't get the same levels of support that they do for their traditional and folk musics in their country. That was an eye-opener for me, that of course we all know that traditional music is popular, Irish music is popular all over the globe, but to see it as a model of best practice, but not having it funded adequately has been shocking to everybody that has become aware of that statistic, I think.
And it's a tough one to not like pit one genre against another, but another thing that kind of glared from the report was when you look at, you know, that the fact that Ireland is so well known for its traditional music, song and dance, and yet opera would get like infinitely more slice of the pie, of the funding pie, and that's not what Ireland is known for.
Yeah.
And I think another thing that we are probably a source of envy for internationally and in the European context is when you look at the transmission, both communal and generational of our traditional arts. Like, it has been very much a grassroots system of cultural transmission and exchange. This is work that's gone on quite silently, without much visibility, but with huge heart and effort in communities and families, through generations. And it is very much the bedrock of all our traditional art forms. Do you see that there might be a kind of a friction there of sort of letting go of that sort of grassroots approach to the arts, and that seeing words like sector and artists rather than, what we're used to hearing, community and musicians and singers, that there might be some kind of, I suppose, conflict there for people?
Well, I don't see a conflict, I think, in practical terms, but like you've said, if you swept away all the kind of grassroots activity that we all grew up with and just had professionalisation, I think I, for one, would be the most bored traditional musician, because for me it's socialisation and playing with your friends and the kind of transmission you're talking about from previous generations. So that's where it's at for me, and it probably always will be, to be honest. But if we are going to, and I try to address this as comprehensively as I can in the introduction, that I think we all understand that traditional music and the traditional arts are at their heart, and even perhaps their best, as a communal community music that doesn't really have to be connected to professionalisation and the commercial sector. But if we're going to have that kind of engagement, we have to make sure that it's operating at its optimum capacity, that it's serving the people who are trying to make a living in it, because they deserve to be able to work professionally just as any other art form. And I think, like, we all understand that it's not about just the sector. We get it, we grew up with it. We understand that. But if you are going to do this, we have to make sure that a traditional artist has the same opportunities as any artist in any art form. And that's again, I'd applaud the vision of Traid Ireland to take that task on, because some people will just see it as an attempt to maybe just focus on a commercial or a professional aspect of the traditional arts, which of course that's not what it's trying to do. Again, it's just saying, okay, if we're going to do this, we have to make sure that it can serve the people that are involved to the best of its ability and advocate on their behalf.
And I think more so than ever this year, we've seen the need for that safety net and that kind of level of support and structure for people who've chosen that career. Yeah. And when you look at, I think when you look at the generation coming up, there's such a sense of that grassroots nature about the music, and yes, there's all these aspirations to play to their best and to travel and tour and make music. I think there's a really strong sense of where the music has come from. So I don't think there's any threat to that.
I agree with you. I tend to look positively at this, because that straight ahead tradition is still where it's at for me, and I think people will never let go of that. It's such a rich tradition that I'm not in any way concerned about it. I suppose what we all collectively have to do is make sure that we have a seat at every table that's making any kind of decisions about arts funding and providing some kind of a sustainable future for those who decide that they want to work professionally in that sector.
Looking at other areas in the report, Jack, there's a section called Appetite for Advocacy. Overall, did you find that people need and want a centralised kind of system? Because when we speak about the essential organs of, like if you think of it anatomically, na Éireann and Harp Ireland and the Traditional Music Archives and Comhaltas as well, all of these very important organs of administration and support, but there is no central nervous system that's kind of feeding to the main brain. So for people who within the community want to go there for that information and advocacy, but also people from outside the community, if they need someone as a representative or and they need to know more about the arts, because that's another part of the report. There's a lot of blind spots when it comes to the gatekeepers within cultural institutions, to who is involved in the traditional arts and what it serves for the country and for the people as well.
Exactly, and like you said, those institutions that we have are world-leading organisations doing great work. But as you say, people both within and outside the tradition, they don't know who, I suppose, the main resource organisations are, or who is one organisation that can represent everybody. And again, it's important to say that it's not really about having just another organisation to come in and be an umbrella. I think what the report states clearly, and which seems like the ethos of Traid Ireland as well, that it's very much about practitioner focus, that it's informed and led by practitioners rather than another layer of administration or bureaucracy.
And creating another hierarchy
exactly.
in a way. Yeah. And this might seem like a simple question to ask, but as I was reading it, I was wondering, Traid Ireland as an organisation, do they have the capacity to become that advocacy body?
Well, I think so, yeah. They need to be supported. They need to be funded because it's abundantly clear. I spent a lot of time on this, and it's a great document that, not because I did it, but a great document because of the people who contributed to it. It's their words, it's their concerns, their experiences. That for me is the greatest achievement of it. It just allows people to speak their minds, which is really important. And I think I was surprised actually. It's not something, I suppose when you start out in a project like this, you kind of get a sense of what might come up and what people might discuss. But yeah, it was new on me that there was such an appetite for one organisation to come in and I suppose work collectively to be a voice for the traditional arts. So yeah, but that's...
To really champion them.
Yeah, and I think that has come across.
And you did mention the people who contributed. So looking at the two main sort of areas of collation, if you like, the online survey was both anonymous and voluntary, is that right?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So you had over 200 people partake in that.
And the idea there was, I suppose, to extend this out beyond the people that I interviewed, to allow anybody contribute their ideas, because that's obviously the way the community works. We can't limit who can speak and who can't. It works best because of this kind of community decision making about what the tradition is and where it can go and where it should go and where it shouldn't go. So the idea of the survey was basically a vehicle to allow people to document their thoughts and offer their opinions and just include as many people as possible beyond the sample group that I had picked of 74 people.
And can I ask, what was your selection process for that sample group of interviewees? There was 74 in total, yeah?
Yeah, 74. So that's always a difficult task. And to be honest, I'm glad that I had been there before. For PhD work I'd done, I had interviewed 110 people, people who were involved with the institutionalisation of traditional and folk musics in higher education, in Ireland and overseas as well. So for that work, it was in the discipline of ethnomusicology, so there are kind of fairly strict ethical methodologies that you have to follow and justify why you include certain people, because you're always going to omit people. That's the nature of selecting a group of people. But I suppose what I'm trying to do is select people that can represent as many strands of the traditional arts community and sector as possible, so you have people involved as practitioners, performers, composers, media, people working in media, people working in funding bodies, just to get as wide a cross-section of the community and the sector as is possible.
You mentioned media, and I know it's going to be dealt with a little bit later on in the day. Toner Quinn is chairing a discussion with Peter Brown and Paula Carroll and Ellie Byrne as well. So just to give a kind of a top line of the media coverage of the traditional arts in Ireland, and I suppose that sense of it possibly being marginalised and undervalued as well.
So I think people are very grateful for what is there. People really appreciate that the fact that we have programs that will specialise in traditional and folk music, but people don't like the fact that it's confined to that usually outside of that mainstream radio won't feature traditional and folk music. That's according to what contributors have said. And as well, in the print media, it's very, very difficult to convince editors. We have writers, but mainstream editors of the papers of record just don't want to engage with the traditional arts as much, and that's what people feel. People feel a sense of frustration because they put a lot of effort and resources into making albums, but I feel like they just don't see the coverage, their opportunities for coverage, as much as there have been before.
I'm going to just show the page 49 of the report. Again, one of the most accessible pages, colour-coded, and you can see as well. Are these relative to the importance of each of the findings? Yeah. So, I mean, obviously the first one, lack of career security, which we've touched on already, funding bodies and application processes, poor media coverage, poor public perception of traditional arts despite international reputation, which we touched on as well earlier. Another one is gender, and looking at the section on that, Jack, I'm guessing this report was finished before, not only before COVID-19, but also before a spotlight was really thrown on traditional music, specifically with the launch of Misha Fosta and looking at, I suppose, the area of sexual misconduct and sexual abuse within the traditional music scene.
Yeah, it was. I had actually signed off on the report. It was finished, and then it came to light about the Misha Fosta movement, and I just decided that I couldn't really sign off on a report that didn't make proper reference to what they have highlighted and the work that they have done, and as well with fair play. So yeah, I thought it was important to cover that, and I think that if we look at the traditional art scene, I think there's actually a huge potential there for everybody to collectively work together and show society what we can do together, because the terrible things that we heard of that have happened in the traditional arts community and society at large, I think we have a really good mechanism and a really good infrastructure to sort that behaviour out and stamp it out completely. And I think actually, rather than see it as a problem that's rampant within the traditional arts, I would try to look at it more positively and say, let's, as a traditional arts community, let's get rid of it and show society at large that we can lead the way in that.
Yeah,
I think.
And there's things that are very actionable as well. One of the anonymous reports from the survey, someone said that they were at an Irish festival in Finland, and they were just given a one-page document to say that the person on site for this festival, who you can report any incidences of sexual misconduct, or like there's someone there dedicated to that. So in a way, everyone's seeing that. They know it's highlighted, they know it's visible, it's not swept under the carpet.
Exactly.
And there's things like that I know Fair Play, from their establishment in 2018, they very much stuck their heads above the parapet, and they were talking about things not just gender related, but also looking at things like established pay rates and making things visible, which I think has a benefit for everyone in the sector. And when you look at that sort of fractured approach, organisations like Fair Play and Misha Fosta and all of these institutions that are helping with so many parts of the traditional art scene, having that centralised advocacy body is just going to help bring all of that together and help people feel supported as well, I think, which is a really important part of creating that community and creating that sense of it's not us against them, it is us, everybody here wanting to make this a better working environment for everyone.
Yeah, that's what I hoped too. That's what I expect. Yeah.
Another one of the things that jumped out for me was lack of mentorship initiatives. And when we look at the sort of master and apprentice aspect of traditional arts, it's huge. And that respect, you look at Shea Malayach and it's still there, that this honouring of the greats. That mentorship idea, how can that be fostered? Obviously summer schools and programs within universities and whatnot, but was there any other suggestions or findings from the report?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a big question as well. So that emerged in a couple of different ways, where you had people, really renowned, high-profile people who were interviewed for the research, who offered, that as a suggestion and said how happy that they would be to kind of, provide that kind of guidance to young musicians if there was a structure there to allow them to do that. So that's one way that it kind of raised its head. And then other people, especially younger musicians, said that, it's a very, very precarious place to try and make your first steps in the traditional art sector, because people don't know, like you've said earlier, people aren't aware always of the funding that's available. So if you look at other art forms and genres of music in Ireland, there are some good examples of mentorship programs that are doing a lot of good work in helping along young, emerging, aspiring artists to get guidance from people who are more established.
And speaking of the younger musicians, looking for that step up into the tradition and to, I suppose, have that guidance as well. You once were that young musician, looking for that guidance, and now looking back, having done this report, how difficult was it for you to have a sense of objectivity, being so much a part of the music community? I know this is, obviously very robust academic research. It's peer reviewed. It has all of those elements to it because it can inform policy. But for yourself, having that sense of investment in it.
Well, the boring answer, the straightforward answer is that I have training in it. You know, that's what I did as a student of ethnomusicology. So it's very much part of that discipline where you try to negotiate this balance between being part of your culture and trying to maybe objectively look at it as if you're an outsider. So I'm grateful for that. But I suppose as well that the report hasn't really been guided by my views. My views on it are pretty much irrelevant because the purpose has been to collect all the great information and data that so many people have offered and to put it together and then to analyse it and to come up with a set of recommendations from that data itself. So really it speaks for itself more than, you know, being directed by me or my experience. So I've tried to stay as objective as possible. And you know, there are sensitive things said in it, and I think any fair-minded person will read it and accept that it's all said and documented in good faith. It's not going to be nice reading for everybody. Some people might take certain things personally, but any fair-minded person will see that it's an attempt to have people express themselves on record in a way that they haven't had an opportunity to do before.
And taking your objectivity hat off and putting on a subjective one,
Yeah.
for you, what was the most important finding from this personally as a musician in the scene?
I couldn't name one. I suppose there are many sub-themes that come across. I guess the one that comes back in many places is the fact that we need a voice, a collective voice that will go and speak on our behalf by ourselves, you know, that we can speak for ourselves. So it's to develop policy because that kind of advocacy potentially can fix every other issue. If it's there, if there's a mechanism there, if there's a structure there, all of the colours that you see on that page there, those things can hopefully get sorted out as a byproduct of that if we all work together collectively for a mutual good, I think.
And I think that's at the heart of it, isn't it? That everyone wants to see this being nurtured and being sustained and supported, and this is a really positive step towards that. Thanks very much, Jack. This report is available on Trad Ireland, so for anyone who wants to get their hands on it, there's a PDF on Trad Ireland. And I just want to quote something that Toner Quinn said after last year's TradTalk. He said, "I didn't realise how badly we needed TradTalk until I was there listening, and until I read this I didn't realise how much we needed to read this." So thank you very much, Jack, for all the work you put into it, and to Trad Ireland for commissioning it.
You're very welcome, Ruth. Thanks a lot.
Gur míle míle maith agah Ruth agus Jack. Well, one of the things that emerges in Jack's report on page 171 is the idea of a physical space or a hub for the traditional arts. And earlier this year in February, myself and Oisín travelled to Stockholm and Oslo with Travel and Training Award support from the Arts Council, and we visited a very interesting place in downtown Oslo called Rikscenen as guests of Folk Org. Now, this space blew us away. It has multiple venues, rehearsal space, gift shop, all focused on the traditional arts and right in downtown Oslo. So here to tell us a bit more about Rikscenen is its CEO and Artistic Director, Anna Carmen Rogan.
Dear international friends, thank you for showing an interest in Rikscenen and our Norwegian hub for traditional music and dance. Since we opened the doors 10 years ago, we've witnessed a really interesting and exciting development in the field of folk music, which is such a rich field in Norway, and definitely one that represents old traditions. But at the same time, it's a young professional field in terms of infrastructure. So we strive to be a lot more than a venue, and we produce performances featuring music and dance and storytelling and theater, often in collaboration with festivals and stages across the country. We provide mentoring and artistic development programs, and we also work to boost the common interest towards our genre and to attract new audiences. So in short, we want to strengthen the whole food chain of folk music and dance and develop the field. So when you come to Oslo, please pay us a visit, and you'll be very welcome at Rikshem.